guys, as outdoor people, we want to capture all of the moments that we see, that we do, that we get to be a part of. That's why we're out in the outdoors. And part of that is knowing what to capture it with. So in this episode of Let's Assess, I am going to go over a basic camera setup, kind of aimed at getting you started. We're not going to dive into anything too technical, but I'm going to feed you some information that I think will really help you moving forward and help your content grow and just help you be able to capture the memory. So let's get right into it.
I don't want to talk. How you try and press the kid and read it, you was soft. All you know is capping, homie, you don't know the law.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Let's Assess. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this episode brings you guys a lot of value. So today it's just me in the garage. AJ's taking care of some stuff out of town, and we just couldn't make one work. I just got out of knee surgery this past week, so I was out of town down at Stedman Clinic doing that. So we couldn't really get around to making our schedules coordinate. So I'm just going to shoot this one, and he'll be back on very soon. So today I want to run you guys through very basic camera stuff. So on Cook Bros on Instagram, we're mainly snowmobile stuff most of the time, but I'm kind of putting it into a hunting category, just anything outdoors. Fishing, we always go up to Alaska and fish, and part of this thing of why I love the outdoors and why I love doing the page is just creating content, and it's truly a passion for me now. And I think that my content has started to get better and better and better, which has taken a lot of work, but in my opinion, in my eye, it's gotten better over these past couple of years. And so one of the number one questions that I get is, what do you recommend for cameras? What camera do you use? What camera setup do you have? And although that is important, the number one thing is to practice like composition, some of the X's and O's of like photography and videography. If you want to have like good pictures, just because you have a nice camera doesn't mean that you're going to get good content. You can get good content on an iPhone or a really cheap camera. But for those of you that think that they need or want to kind of upgrade everything, I'm going to go through just some basic stuff with cameras. So, but I want to start by saying you don't need to spend a ton of money. I've seen people get incredible things with iPhones if you know what you're doing, settings. And so I just want to put that up front, that before I dive into this gear, which a lot of it now over time that I've gotten is pretty expensive, I just want to say that if you can't afford crazy gear and all the lenses and all the stuff, don't worry, you can still get good stuff. Like 90% of us have iPhones or access to something that can get pretty good footage. But what you need to work on is composition, and just look on YouTube of how to make better videos and stuff like that. Because I promise you, if I handed you my camera setup and reset all the settings, your videos would probably turn out a little bit better than what they do now if you're trying to make videos now, but I guarantee you they would not turn out as good as you think, and that's because you don't know what you're doing with the camera. So that's the number one thing. Just take that into consideration. That's the number one most important thing. I see a lot of people shooting on, a $4,000 body camera that it's completely out of focus all the time. They're using the wrong lens. They're using just on and on and on. And so I just want to say that before I get into the gear, don't feel like you need all the gear. The other thing that I was thinking about is, I think that, I'm just going to talk about the basics in this podcast or this episode. And if you guys have questions, ask, and I can reach out and go more into depth if you guys want. But it seems like people just need to know the basics when it comes to outdoor and adventure stuff, because a lot of the stuff that I see on YouTube, like, it's good for if you're in a studio, or if you're going to take wedding pictures, or if you're going to shoot something, like that. That's very, animals at a zoo. You can see a lot of like videos on that, but that's a lot of the time so unrealistic for people like us who we don't want to be carrying 15 lenses. We don't want to be, like, the gear to us has to be very versatile to go from, shooting maybe a vlog go into shooting wildlife within a matter of seconds. And so I think that's something that I can help you guys with on what I do. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that my way's the best way, but I've gone through a lot of gear just basically figuring out like, okay, I like this, I don't like this. And I've done a ton of research into this stuff, and this is what works for me. So to begin, what I think the first place that you need to start out as when you're kind of trying to figure out the camera thing is, do you want it to be a photo camera or do you want it to be a video camera? So I'm going to go on the video side of things and then jump into the photo side of things. And we're talking bodies here. And then like all of these, for example, if you guys are watching this on YouTube, you have a body, then you have a lens. So I'm going to talk about bodies first, and then I'll jump into lenses. I want to keep this super quick. I don't want to overwhelm you guys. Okay, bodies. What you can do is research on YouTube. There are so many camera YouTubers now that do camera reviews, like search what's the best camera for video. And then just do research and start watching a bunch of videos, and you'll see specs that like, oh, this would work for me, this wouldn't work for me. But one of the things as a action-based videographer that I like is high frame rates. So like the camera that I shoot on will shoot at 4K at 120 frames per second. So when I'm shooting that, let's say a snowmobiler is jumping, I can slow down that film or that shot to 25% of its original speed and not lose any frames, meaning it'll look natural to the eye. It won't be like a robot flying through the air. So to me, the video spec wise, 120 frames is a huge deal. And so look for cameras that have 120 frames. A lot of them, for me, I would go, if you're an outdoor guy or gal, I would go mirrorless because they're smaller. They have less moving parts that can break, and they're just kind of the future, in my opinion. So they don't have, I'm not even going to get into it. It's neither here nor there. I would just go mirrorless. So for me, I shoot Sony mirrorless. And so to start, what I did was I bought into their 6000 series. So it's like 6400, 6500, 6600. And now they just came out with the 6700. That's where I started and just kind of learned how to use the camera. Then I went up to an A7S III. And I went up to the A7S III at the time so I could shoot 4K at 120. Before the A7S III, you had to have like a cinema rig to shoot 120K or to shoot 120 frames per second, sorry. So look into specs when it comes to video that suit your needs. Maybe you shoot hiking vlogs and you don't need, like, nothing's flying through the air super fast. Maybe 60 frames per second where you can slow it down to 50% of the original speed is adequate, and you don't need the 120 frames. But think about what you need as a photographer or as a videographer, and these things are subject to change. That's why you shouldn't go out and buy a $10,000 body and then it's not anything that you want it to do because you don't even know what you're doing yet. So I would recommend, like on Sony's side, people are ranting and raving about the ZV-E1. That'll shoot 120 frames per second. The Sony A6700 that just came out, I believe, will shoot 4K at 120. And those cameras are not like break the bank cameras. I mean, they're expensive, but they're not 10 grand. And for the stuff that they'll put out, they're great cameras, and they're small, so you can take them in a pack or whatever. But just look into that. I can't sit on here and name every single feature that you need to look for. But for me, if you guys are snowmobilers or hunters or something's going to happen real fast, I mean, maybe not even hunting, but something that's going to happen real fast, you want a camera that'll shoot high frame rates, ideally 4K up to 60, which should not be hard to find anymore. Okay, if you have any questions about that, guys, just message me on Cook Bros on Instagram, and I'll answer them. I'm trying to do my best not to confuse you guys, but I know this is probably really confusing. This takes more than one podcast of listening to understand all this stuff. So, okay. On the photo side of things, so you kind of have to somewhat pick. Do you want a camera body that is incredible for photos, incredible for video, or pretty good at both? Or that's insanely good at both if you have that much money, which if you're just beginning, you probably don't want to spend $6,000 to $8,000 on a body. So on the photo side of things, the big thing to me would be megapixel. And the reason why is because when we're doing outdoor adventure stuff, you're not always going to get like a perfect shot where it's framed perfectly. And so with more megapixels means there's more data there. So when you're editing the photo, you're able to zoom in more and not lose all your resolution. That's why I like having a high megapixel camera. And so the high megapixel cameras, not all of them are geared for video. So you kind of have to, that's what I'm saying, you kind of have to figure out, do I want a photo camera or do I want a video camera? And then, or you can go with something like, in the Sony line, I'm very familiar with Sony, like an A7 IV is like what they call a hybrid camera. So that's like in the middle. Or you can go to the Sony, another bodies like the Sony A1. That's really expensive, but that way you're not sacrificing any photo power. Like it's fully loaded on photo specs and fully loaded on video specs. So it's just an all around beast, but that's a really expensive camera. So for example, like the A7 IV, which is a less expensive camera, it's more of an entry level camera, still expensive, but that camera is going to shoot great video. I don't think it shoots 120 frames per second, so I really wouldn't use it for most of the stuff I do, but it shoots incredible photos and incredible video, up to 60 frames per second at 4K. And the thing that I will say when you guys are watching these people, when I'm telling you to go do research, when you're watching these people talk, a lot of them will say, oh, it only has like, for example, this camera, the A7S III, they'll say, well, this camera only has 12 megapixels. It's not a good photo camera. The photos that you can pull out of those cameras are so good. Like some of the best photos that I've ever taken, like of the galaxy, of elk, of snowmobiles, they were on 12 megapixel sensors. And so if you're comparing it to like a really, really high-end photo camera, maybe it doesn't have that cropping capability like I previously talked about. But if you guys are just looking to post on Instagram and stuff, these 12 megapixels like the Sony A7S III are so good for that. So good for that. So don't listen to the people that are like, oh, it sucks for photo. Maybe if you're blowing up a shot of a shot the size of your wall, maybe it's not that great. But for Instagram, it is perfectly significant. Okay, I'm getting lost here. I like to talk about cameras apparently. So that's the bodies. Okay, guys, again, hit me up on Instagram if you have any questions. There's no way that I can put everything into one episode. Okay, lenses. So what they call, like, if you get a really expensive body or a good body and you cheap out on lenses, you literally just did yourself a complete disservice. For those of you who are hunters, it's like buying a really good rifle and just junk scope. So if you're going to buy a nice body, make sure that you can afford nice lenses. The thing that I recommend for lenses is a couple things. One, the packability. So for me, like I can't bring 15 lenses like some of these guys that go to like studio photo shoots to photo shoot a model or do like wedding photography or something. For me, it's like it either has to be on my back or the back of my snowmobile. So I'm not going to bring 300 pounds in lenses, but I still want to get everything. So for me, what I've found is if you guys watch my YouTube channel a lot in the winter, I'll do like a snowmobile vlogs where I'm talking into the camera in between like riding spots. And so for that, I need something that's ultra wide. And what I mean by that is something that's not zoomed in super far where it's like you can see like my nose takes up the whole screen. I want something where you can, it's away from me and you can see my face, you can see the background, and it gives like the viewer just kind of a better perspective of what's going on. And so for that, I'll use like a 16 mil focal length. And so that'll be like, for example, the lens that I use for that goes with me everywhere is a 16 to 35 because the 35 mil is good for like, you can do portraits with it. It's not the best, but you can do portraits. You can do pictures of the campsite. You could do pictures of the snowmobile. But also you could zoom out and then shoot like vlog stuff. And so that's why I like the 16 to 35. It's an expensive lens, but for me, it's like I'm shooting on it right now. So it's worth it to me. The other lens that I'll bring everywhere. So that's ultra wide, guys. That's like what you shoot a landscape with, or you could do real estate with it or vlog or whatever. The other lens that always goes with me everywhere right now is the 70 to 200. So I feel like with the 16 to 35 and the 70 to 200, I can do just about anything. And the reason why is a lot of people are like, well, you're missing from 35 to 70. For me, I'm willing to drop the 35 to the 70 in there, that focal range, in order to save packing a full other lens. So I like the 70 to 200. It is like, what if I can shoot anything, or on any lens, it's a 70 to 200. I love that it's optically stabilized. It's light. It feels good in my hands. It creates sweet images. And like, to my eye, it just looks really, really good. So this, for example, if you guys are watching on YouTube, this white lens right here is a 70 to 200. And then what I found, and this is subject to change, I think I actually will change this year, because I'm kind of getting more into wildlife stuff, is what I was doing is I was packing, for those of you on YouTube, this piece right here. This is called a teleconverter. So this is a 2x teleconverter that I put in between the lens, the 70 to 200, and the body. And so what that basically does is, instead of 70 to 200, it goes from a 140 to 400. And so then I just get twice the amount of zoom. And it's really small. The teleconverter is small. It's light. It's easy to pack. That way I don't have to have another lens. The reason I say I might get away from that is I feel like for wildlife, I feel like I'm going to drop that and actually I might even drop the 70 to 200 and start taking the 200 to 600, because I want to get those really, really up close shots of bears, of birds, of elk. And the more that I get into hunting, I just want to get one and try it out. If I don't like it, then I'll sell it. Okay, so 16 to 35, 70 to 200. That is what I feel like will cover 90% of the stuff outdoors. And guys, again, we're talking outdoor filmmaking. I'm not talking about wedding stuff. I'm not talking about anything like that. I'm talking about outdoor stuff. 16 to 35, 70 to 200, I feel like will cover almost everything. Now, when I say 16 to 35, 70 to 200, those are focal lengths. God. So basically what that means is basically it's like zoom. So the higher the number, the more, quote, zoomed in it is. The lower the number, the more zoomed out it is. The other thing that you got to look on lenses that's a big deal is like your aperture. So what I shoot on is f2.8. My lenses are f2.8s. So what that means, that number, the lower the number, the wider that lens will open. And that's going to be better in low light because it'll absorb more light into the sensor. And you won't get like weird grain and stuff like that. If you can't afford, like the f2.8s are expensive. If you can't afford those, by all means go to f4s. They're not bad. I have a couple f4s and I like them a lot. But learn how to use the cameras. Like in the camera settings, you don't always want to be shooting in your lowest aperture, your lowest f-stop. So those are just a couple tips that I have. I know I'm all over the place, but I'm trying to just give you a basic rundown of cameras. Another thing that I was going to jump into real quick is some accessories that I like to have. that I think are necessary. I have a lot of accessories that aren't necessary. One of those for like shooting, if you guys shoot cars or snowmobiles or anything really, any vehicle that's like has paint or shiny or whatever, or you're on snow or water, I use this is a CP filter. So it's a circular polarizer. So this is basically like putting sunglasses on your lens, and this will just increase contrast in snow. I use this. This never ever comes off my camera. Really ever. I took it off just now to show you guys. I shouldn't be using it in here probably, but this, whether I'm on the water fishing, whether it's polarized sunglasses. So think about it. It's like if you go fishing, you want polarized sunglasses. If you're snowmobiling, you want polarized lenses. Anything that it just makes things look so much better. And I just like it. I don't know about it. And then the other thing that you need to budget for are SD cards that can keep up with your camera. So if you get a really high-end body that shoots high frame rates and you get a junk memory card from Walmart, you're doing yourself a disservice. The other thing, guys, quick tip that I would add in there, I was talking to a guy about this the other day. If you're going to shoot high frame rate video with high picture profiles and stuff like that, you need a beast of an editing machine to edit it. It does no good to take the video if you can't edit it. And like a low powered like Acer from Walmart laptop it's going to just completely crash it. So all of this stuff, the higher and higher you go up in cameras, the higher and higher budget you need to have editing machinery to be able to handle your film. Because like, for example, I had a laptop a couple months ago. Well, no, it was like a year ago. And I got the A7S III and was shooting at 4K 120. And it would take me like 20 minutes of rendering just to watch like 30 seconds. And so you want to make sure that you have a really good laptop if you're going to shoot on high-end stuff. That's just a tip. I can shoot more content about that. But anyway, guys, I am rambling on now. I didn't want this to be structured. I just wanted to shoot it from the hip. If I was explaining to my younger self what kind of camera stuff I should get, I don't want to tell you what exactly you need because that's up to you. But I just want to give you some parameters that can help you guys not be so confused, because the camera world is so full of like crazy expensive gear that a lot of it is really cool and a lot of it you'll never use. Like I have so much stuff that I bought and I never use it. It's not light. It doesn't work. So 16 to 35, 70 to 200. Those are my go-to travel lenses. I feel like I can do 90% of stuff with that. Bodies, I like to shoot 4K at 120. So I look for a body that can do that. The Sonys are really good. I've never had an overheating problem. I ran a whole battery doing a podcast, shooting it at 4K, and it's fine. So I'm a big fan of Sony. Again, video 4K 120, full-size sensors. Photo, I am a video first shooter, but if I do photo, I look for high megapixels and cameras that can shoot fast, a lot of frames per second, because I'm shooting a lot of fast-moving stuff. So if you guys have any questions, leave her down in the comments. DM me at CookBros on Instagram. And that was a lot of information. That was a lot of rambling. But till next time, appreciate you. Love you. Bye-bye.